As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized CIMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a CIMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the CIMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the CIMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
The Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, Canada District presents the 9th International Accountants Conference, themed Strategic Upscaling of Accounting Profession within the Dynamics of Technology. Date 16th to 20th July 2024. Time is 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily. Venue, Best Western Premier Calgary Plaza Hotel and Conference Center, 1316 33th Street NE, Calgary, Alberta, T2A 6B6. Seasoned speakers like Sheyi Wolabi, a partner at MNP Calgary, will be speaking on review of the accounting profession and technology synergy. Derek Greer, the Chief Information and Security Officer, Protexer, will be speaking on disruptive technology and AI upscaling for accountants. Greg Howe, the CEO, Black All Systems Calgary, will be speaking on accountants in the era of diversified profession, while Professor Godwin Emmanuel Oyedokun will be speaking on decision-making optimization through data mining. The Canadian High Commissioner as well as the ICAN President will also be in attendance. This conference promises to be value for your time and money. Hurry! Register today by sending an email to Mr. Blessing Familusi, chairman at icancanada.net, or St. Badamosi at ican.org.ng, or I. Adams at ican.org.ng, or simply visit our website www.icancanada.org. ICAN Canada Conference 2024. Be there.
The Skill Up Artisans Program Super is an initiative of the federal government.
The aim of Super is to upskill Nigerian artisans for better employability. These were carried out by collecting the data of Nigeria artisans through massive registration, training, certification, and licensing for better job opportunities both locally and internationally. Super will improve the quality of life of Nigeria artisans. It will improve the quality of work from Nigeria artisans, enhance work and professional ethics from Nigeria artisans, reduce dependency on foreign artisans, and increase foreign exchange through talent export.
Log on to super.itf.gov.ng to register now. Super, upskilling Nigeria artisans for super job.
Security is key to national development and growth. No nation can be truly economically successful without peace and stability, or when its security is threatened. This is why we must perform our civic obligation of duly paying our taxes so as to provide the needed resources for government to secure our lives and properties. When we pay our taxes, government is provided with the needed resources to equip our security agencies for a safer Nigeria. The money we pay as taxes is used to purchase equipment and hardware, invest in intelligence and other sophisticated technology, as well as cater for the welfare of all security personnel. A secure nation is a prosperous nation. Nigeria is safer when we pay our taxes. FIRS, it pays to pay your tax.
Deputies, so help me God. By the powers conferred on me by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigerian Act number 15 of 1965, as well as the authority vested in me by the Governing Council of the Institute. I now admit you into membership in the accountancy profession. Congratulations.
All the inductees, please stand up and clap for yourselves. Thank you. Thank you. Without you, we won't be here. We appreciate you. We appreciate you greatly. Tomorrow, you will be inducted as chartered accountants, and I pray that the sky is your limit.
As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized CIMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a CIMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the CIMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study Exam. Start studying the CIMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the exciting and educative program ICAN on Air. Today, the 30th of May 2024. I hope you're learning the newly introduced old national anthem. I really bet you are. I'll just say good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening to my professional colleagues. And as mentioned during last week's program, my colleague actually mentioned the induction ceremony of 2015 chartered accountants, and I pray that this brings you good tidings, and it also brings good tidings for everyone around you. So this evening we'll be discussing something exciting, something we do this every week. My name remains Fumi Olani, and the topic is mitigating regulatory compliance, risks and financial crimes. So we'll be delving into the strategic influence of professional accountants. Today, we have a special guest in the studio, and I'd like to bring in our special guest, Mr. Obinna Okafor, FCA. He's the CEO, Vicop's Bean Consult Limited. You're welcome, Mr. Obinna.
Much for having me.
I guess we'd like to go on a commercial break, and when we come back, I would bring in this erudite scholar to come tell us everything about the topic of today. Remember, it's ICAN on Air, so please bring in or introduce your friends. Tell them to join the program. It's very informative. It's very educative, and we'll be glad you're here. And you will be glad you're here also. So I'd like to go on a commercial break, and we'll be right back with Mr. Obinna Okafor.
The Skill Up Artisans Program Super is an initiative of the federal government.
The aim of Super is to upskill Nigerian artisans for better employability. This we are carrying out by collecting the data of Nigeria artisans through massive registration, training, certification, and licensing for better job opportunities, both locally and internationally.
Super will improve the quality of life of Nigeria artisans. It will improve the quality of work from Nigeria artisans. enhance work and professional ethics from Nigeria artisans, reduce dependency on foreign artisans, and increase foreign exchange through talent export.
Log on to super.itf.gov.ng to register now. Super, upskilling Nigeria artisans for super job.
You're welcome back to ICAN on Air, and today we're discussing mitigating regulatory compliance risk and financial crimes. Yes, it's not the same financial crimes that you hear, but of course, all accountants, you need to know what this means. And we're going to be talking about, our focus will be the strategic influence of professional accountants. And our guest today, like I mentioned before the break, is Mr. Obina Okafor. He's the CEO of Vicos Bean Consults Limited, and is a dynamic, seasoned, talented, and tested professional. He has over 20 years of work experience as an accountant, as an internal control auditor, and also as a chief compliance officer in the financial sector. And is being the former chief compliance officer at NICOM, relationships officer of IEA PLC Group, which is in financial services. He's also the former chairman of the Risk Management and Compliance Committee, RMCC, now Risk Audit and Compliance Committee, RAC, of the Nigerian Insurance Association. He's the first vice president of the National Advisory Council for the Nigerian chapter of Chartered Institute for Security and Investment of UK. He is a part-time lecturer with the College of Insurance and Financial Management in Ogun State, Nigeria. Mr. Okafor, you're welcome today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure. Thank you, viewers and professional colleagues.
It's good to have you. Thank you so much for letting us have this opportunity to talk to you. So, when we're discussing this topic, is very, very technical. So I know that you can treat this topic as though both accountants and non-accountants can understand. But I would like to start with you letting us know, because we have global viewers here. I know you have a lot to do in the UK and also in Nigeria. So because this platform gives them an opportunity to learn and also to share from your depth of intellectual knowledge, your skills, and your experience in this field. So my first question is, what is compliance risk, and how can compliance risk actually be identified by anybody?
All right, thank you very much once again. When we talk about compliance risk, we are talking about the likelihood. Really, compliance has to do with regulatory requirements, policies and rules, guidelines, standards, and regulations. So when you talk about compliance, we are talking about complying with those rules, regulation, laws, and standards. Now, compliance risk here has to do with the likelihood that it could be a breach in any of those regulations and laws, or a likelihood that a new regulation can come into being that may affect our business or our operations, our practice, or our environment. So those are what the compliance risk is about.
Okay, that's very explanatory. And as we dig deep into today's topic of discourse, what is regulatory compliance? I know you've been able to shed some light on compliance list, but what is regulatory compliance and how is it actually conducted?
All right, regulatory compliance means complying with regulations, complying with laid down rules, regulations, complying with guidelines, complying with standards, complying with laws, the acts of parliament, and complying with best practices. Those are what regulatory compliance is about, and how it can be identified or checked or practiced is to identify your regulatory universe. What are those regulatory obligations that you are supposed to implement or observe or adopt in your area of operation, in your industry, in your field, and then make sure that you have a dashboard that specifies what and how and when and where those things should be done. So those are the process. You identify what are those regulatory milestone, regulatory framework, regulatory universe that you are supposed to comply with, then begin to look at what are you expected to do in those things. That is the second leg of it.
Okay, so what would you say is the key difference between when we say regulatory compliance and when we say policy compliance?
Right, regulatory compliance is driven from the external environment, comes from most times by the governments or by external setting bodies like standard setting bodies, institutions that bring out those impositions, the global bodies like Financial Action Task Force, like an IMF, United Nations Security Councils, and other bodies that come up with those. So those are externally imposed obligations. But when we talk about policy compliance, we're talking about internally generated or internally developed guidelines and procedures and processes of doing things in the organization. So that means that, and most of the times also those policy issues are also driven by the externally imposed compliance issues. So that is why they go hand in hand. And for an organization to be able to do very well and be seamless and improve to achieve the objective for which it is set up, you have to just look at both ends, from the externally imposed obligation that has to do with compliance with regulations, and then the internally developed policies and procedures. Because for you to be able to domesticate those policies, those laws, those regulations, those guidelines, there must be policy pronouncement in-house on how to do those things. So I can also say that to a reasonable degree, some of the policies you have in-house are a domestication of the externally imposed regulations, and other policies also may be out of best practice or voluntary implementation of things that the organization feel should be done to be able to advance the objective and the goals of the organization. So they are both internal and external driven policies and
yeah, that is so clear. Thank you so much, Mr. Okafor. And if you're just joining, we have Mr. Okafor in the studio, and we are just discussing everything about regulatory compliance. We want you to know, we want you to be abreast of all of these things that will make you have a robust engagement and career. So the topic is mitigating regulatory compliance risk and financial crimes. And we are discussing the strategic influence of professional accountants that we all have. So, Mr. Okafor, I want you to please, how can you describe what the key compliance risk management ecosystem? For example, it could be in any organization, whether public or private. How can you describe the key compliance risk management ecosystem?
Well, the key compliance risk management ecosystem has to talk about what are the makeup of what are those practice or steps or activities that should be taking place in identifying, in managing your compliance risk. And that starts from the process of identifying what the risks are, trying to assess those risks, trying to analyze those risks, trying to evaluate them, and then try to monitor as well as reporting side of it. So those are the entire chain of events that happens in the course of trying to carry out a manage the regulatory or risk management processes. So that is what it's talking about. Then in talking about the other components of it, can be talking about what are the regulations, what are the guidelines, what are the policies in place, what are the system in place, what are the laws or standard sets, and what are the pronouncements that have been put in place by both from the, I've explained before about internal and external, what are the best practices. So those are things that make up the ecosystem that has to do with the compliance risk management.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Okafor. We have our audience, and I just want to recognize all of our audience in the studio today. Damilare Abdullahi, thank you so much for joining. And also we have Bodude Dayo from Ado-Ekiti. Sheyi Adeniji, thank you from Lagos. Olamide Olanikpekun from Ibadan. Fagbenro Esther from Ogun State. From Abuja, we have Abiola Adewumi. Tanko Ibrahim is joining us from Kaduna. And we have Taufik Lawal from Abeokuta. From Lafia, Joseph Bako We see you and we say thank you so much for always being here. Balkis Abbas from Abuja. From Oyo State, we have Tokwe Alabi Joel, Oshunlano, Olabodun from Lagos State. And every one of you from Nasarawa, I see John Ade. Thank you very much for joining the program. And please reach out to a friend and a friend and a friend and a colleague to join also. So, Mr. Okafo, my question is, when you look at, in line with the regulatory compliance, what would you say is financial crime management? And can you run us through some of the examples that we can find when you talk about financial crime management, for example?
Okay, let me start by telling you what financial crimes are. Financial crime refers to all crimes committed by individuals or group of individuals that involves taking money or other resources or property that belongs to someone else to obtain financial and professional gain. And when we talk about various components of financial crime, we'll look at something that has to do with terrorism financing, cyber security crimes, financial market manipulations. You talk about something like tax evasion. You talk about bribery and corruption. You talk about money laundering, and we have also we have talked about cyber crime. These are part of the crime of fraud, commission of fraud. And we also have several other forms of crime that has to do with what we describe as predicate offenses that have to do with illicit traffic in narcotic drugs, that has to do with conversion of property that are not meant for instance, what happens in government sector or even private sector, where people convert resource of property that's not meant for them and for personal use. We have engaging illicit traffic in narcotics, drug and psychotropic substances. We also have participation in organized criminal groups and racketeering. So it has to do with terrorism, financing, trafficking in humans, migrant smuggling, tax evasion, sexual exploitation, illicit armed trafficking, and stolen in goods, and so many corruption and counterfeiting in currencies, piracy of product and environmental crimes, and murder, grievous bodily injuries, and kidnapping, ransom, restraints, robbery, theft, smuggling, extortion, forgery, privacy, market manipulation, and so on and so forth. The lists are endless. So all these are various crimes that people get involved in. Then when you talk about now how to mitigate them, we talk about now coming up, there are two ways to it. First of all, the regulatory part, whereby organizations have to adhere to those rules, laid down policies. And you realize that from our simple control system, whenever you have collusion, controls are always failing. There are so many laws, there are so many rules, there are so many laws available, but discover that financial crimes still continue to go. The only best way to do is from both sides of regulatory part, punishing the offenders and making sure that institutions, three stakeholders are involved here. The government make the laws, the corporate organizations are those who obey the institutions, I mean the operators here, and then individuals. Individuals has to do with professionals and business owners. So everybody has to play their own role to have that the patriotic approach to ensuring that everybody is a victim in crime. Even the criminals are victims of crime. So in any way you try to support or to lend a helping hand for a criminal to get through, directly or indirectly, you are a victim of that crime. So everybody has to, there will be that collaboration of all stakeholders, starting from the government, law enforcement agencies, regulators, operators, individual professionals, and employees of organizations. You see something, you say something, you abstain from doing the wrong thing and also report the wrong thing. Those are the ways to fight against financial crime. And where everybody try to do the right thing, the criminals will be isolated and it will be easy to identify who they are. And in some crimes, it doesn't mean that there are no crimes, but because crimes have punishment or have penalty for it, and that's why people try to avoid it. So those are the kind of things we have to do.
In fact, Mr. Okafor, when you were talking, everything that comes to mind is aiding and abetting. So if you
Clearly.
know that someone is committing a crime and then you are also trying to aid that person to do more and you're not reporting such scenario, then you're also committing that crime. So you can be found guilty. There's a
A
legal
criminal by
doctrine
accomplice,
that says if
an
you are an
accomplice by.
accomplice of bad character or bad habits. So
Yeah.
thank you. I mean, when you were talking as though you live in this regulatory, when you talk about risk management, regulatory compliance. So I'm really feeling you, and I hope that my audience are too. So my question, Mr. Okafor, is considering professional accountant is what I mean, how they've been able to assist when it comes to compliance, risk management, and all of that. What else do you advise professional accountants to do to be able to do this work as though it means the world to them?
You know, by our training and by our practice, we are the purveyors of resources of the organization to preserve, to save, to ensure you limit losses and costs, and do whatever can be done to advance the upside, the revenue side. So the preservation and the protection of the company's assets and reduce its liability is the primary role of the organization. Now, of course, we know that one of the basic sanctions or penalties or downside of regulatory breaches are sanctions, penalties that go downrightly to our liquidity, and that is not what the accountant wants. So the accountant does everything he can do to catalyze. Catalyst is something that leads to upscale the speed that makes what do I call it now? Chemical reaction to be faster and better and to do something better. So that's what accountant does. That accountants should not be one who should be seen as encouraging or advising, motivating his organization to do the wrong thing. It should be the one that should be motivating to do the right thing, because the implication of doing the wrong thing over time will be the bottom line of the organization. And your duty as an accountant, if you are there, is to paint the picture of the organization. Many people don't understand it, because any place you go for any transaction, they require for your financial statement, and that's the picture being painted. Not those who are in the market faces. Maybe they think that they're the one that are making the money, but the one who is really painting the picture of what the organization is about is the man down there. The same thing for the auditors. The auditors are a stopper. Many things that would have just gone like that, he put a pin to it to want to have a clarification. Those actions unknowingly are risk management actions. They are, when we talk about prudential concept, is a proactive way of preventing something from happening. That's risk management. Okay, regulatory compliance is what the accountant does, ensuring that your filing of taxation, filing of annual account, filing of all fileable things, those are regulatory compliance. Those are risk management issues also. So the accountant have to do that by ensuring, though most of the times in accounting, the accountants are always busy, they are choked with activities. In most organizations, one of the challenges we're having is that because they don't see the accountant or the auditor as a revenue center, they will have limited hands doing those jobs. But in the midst of that tight schedule, you should always look at this area of regulatory compliance, because a failure to it or for it goes directly to the bottom line of the organization. Or if the organization survives, because regulatory compliance or failure of it is one of the high risk things that anybody should talk about, because organizations are created, nurtured, can also be killed and buried by regulation. So if anything, that just like we have terminal diseases, regulatory breaches are terminal diseases organizations, because it can be used to suspend your operating license, it can be used to shut down the organization, or can be used to liquidate the organization. So when an organization does not exist anymore, there's no business. So because of that, and since the passion of the financial accountant or the accountant or the auditor, because he sees the figure, not everybody in the organization sees figures. There are some organizations that are cash cows. Everybody thinks that cash is flowing. But when the accountant prepares the record, he knows that this organization is bleeding. He's the one that sees all those facts. So he must be a catalyst to push every other person to make sure that both external and internal policies and regulations are adhered to.
I mean, I took that home and I jotted it down. That regulatory breaches are, if you breach any regulatory compliance, then those are terminal diseases for the company. And no one wants the company to die. We all want it for the foreseeable future to exist. So thank you so much for that. But while you were speaking, you talked about change catalysts, that the professional accountants are change catalysts. But I also know that as the change catalyst, that they are I would categorize myself also, that we are known to be professional accountants. We have a lot of weather, storm to weather, and even in this corrupt world, or even in the corrupt environment and complex systems that we find ourselves, how can we continue to be the change catalyst that you have called us?
All right, thank you very much. Now, starting from the point where you don't have a system, if you find yourself in an environment, an organization where you don't have a system, you have to push to have those systems put in place. Now, where you have a system that is just paying lip service to it, you have to be an advocate to it. It may not be an overnight win, but continuously being an advocate or agitator for that implementation. And one thing also that happens is that as accountants, we are figure people. We provide facts. It's not by hearsay. It's not by sentiment. Provide evidence, both empirical and likely events that can happen, and you'll be able to drive home your argument. When you make those arguments over time, even though the people are deaf, at their subconscious point, they will think about it. And if anything goes wrong at some point in time to come, they will remember that you warned them. So one thing you have to do is that don't just go for the fact that maybe because they did not listen to when you said the first and second time you kept quiet. No, continue talking it or continue saying it. Because at some point in time to come, if anything goes wrong, nobody will blame you, say, you were auditor here, you were accountant here. You would have had a record to show, to prove. In fact, sometimes it's not even by mere verbal saying it. Put a report in place to advise your organization, to advise your management, to advise your board of what should be done. If it is not done, fine, because your duty ends, except if you are the managing director or the chairman or the board that takes that decision. But if not, continue doing what your role should be. Don't give up. Don't get discouraged. At some point in the history of that organization, they will remember there was someone who emphasized on something like this, that they did it and it's paying off, or they failed to do it and they are paying for it.
Thank you. Don't stop being the change catalyst. That's what Mr. Okafor has told us this evening. We'd like to go on a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll take questions from the audience. Get your questions together. It could be real life situation. It could be from the friend. It could be anything that you've encountered in the course of your career or your professional work in whatever place you find yourself. So we'll go on a break and we'll be right back. It's still ICAN on Air.
Security is key to national development and growth. No nation can be truly economically successful without peace and stability, or when its security is threatened. This is why we must perform our civic obligation of duly paying our taxes so as to provide the needed resources for government to secure our lives and properties. When we pay our taxes, government is provided with the needed resources to equip our security agencies for a safer Nigeria. The money we pay as taxes is used to purchase equipment and hardware, invest in intelligence and other sophisticated technology, as well as cater for the welfare of all security personnel. A secure nation is a prosperous nation. Nigeria is safer when we pay our taxes. FIRS, it pays to pay your tax.
The Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, Canada Districts presents the 9th International Accountants Conference, themed Strategic Upscaling of Accounting Profession within the Dynamics of Technology. Date 16th to 20th July 2024. Time is 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily. Venue, Best Western Premier Calgary Plaza Hotel and Conference Center, 1316 33 Street NE, Calgary, Alberta, T2A 6B6. Seasoned speakers like Sheyi Wolabi, a partner at MNP Calgary, will be speaking on review of the accounting profession and technology synergy. Derek Greer, the Chief Information and Security Officer, Protexer, will be speaking on disruptive technology and AI upscaling for accountants. Greg Howe, the CEO, Black All Systems Calgary, will be speaking on accountants in the era of diversified profession, while Professor Godwin Emmanuel Oyedokun will be speaking on decision-making optimization through data mining. The Canadian High Commissioner as well as the ICAN President will also be in attendance. This conference promises to be value for your time and money. Hurry! Register today by sending an email to Mr. Blessing Familusi, Chairman at icancanada.net, or St. Badamosi at ican.org.ng, or I Adams at ican.org.ng, or simply visit our website www.icancanada.org. ICAN Canada Conference 2024. Be there.
Welcome back to the studio. It's still ICAN on Air, and we're discussing something very technical, something everybody must know about. I mean, we all talk financial crimes, we talk risk, we talk compliance. So yes, that is why mitigating regulatory compliance risk and financial crimes is coming to you this evening. And our guest today is still Mr. Obinna Okafor, FCA. He's the CEO, Vicos Bean Consult Limited. Mr. Obinna, you're welcome. You're welcome again, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I know a lot of our guests have been enjoying the session. You see, ICAN brings you this free of charge at your doorstep. And we've been talking about a lot of things around crimes, around financial crimes, around the risk, around how you can be compliant even in the place you find yourself. So, sir, I also want you to inform our global audience on some of the possible challenges that they may be faced with as professional accountants, especially when they're playing the role as the change catalyst that you have called us this evening.
Well, it's a very common one. Number one, depending on the level and the accountant is in the organization, sometimes you realize that the placements of the accountant may not be such authoritative, or may not confer on the accountant the power to carry out some things without reporting, or probably taking excessive permission from someone else. That could be a limitation. It also could be a place where you have a wrong tone from the top, where you have a system where you are the top is not showing the right example. Probably the board is not acting right. The chief executive or the top management are not acting right. That could be an impediment or a challenge also. You also have a system whereby every other person around seems to be doing the wrong thing, and it appears the accountant is a one-man out in the system. So the tendency to say, well, if you cannot beat them, you should join them likely. You also have the societal issues, societal pressure that comes to play. This is external to the organization. Societal pressure that put pressure on the accountant, that demands that, well, you all go to the same markets, and this is likelihood of trying to compromise the process by doing that. So there are so many of those things that comes around. These are general challenges. But the fact remains that there's a local parliament that said that one cannot be afraid that somebody will die in the war and then refuse to go to war. There will always be war, and somebody has to go to war. So every profession has its hazard. As an accountant, as an auditor, you have that tag of being seen as a stopper. Some people will hate you in the organization. Some people will plotting evil against you in the organization. But just keep doing what you are engaged to do. At some point, you will always be vindicated for doing what you are supposed to do. The challenges are there, but there's no way you can run away from challenges. It's part of life.
It's part of success, and it's part of excellence. So keep doing the right thing that you have set out to do. Don't join the bad wagons. Mr. Obinna Okafor, FCA, has advised us on that today. So, also, sir, despite the several laws, there are regulations, there are guidelines that are bound, the rate of these financial crimes that we're talking about here is still on the increase. What could be the reason? What would you allude to be the reason for this increase in financial crimes?
I mentioned connivance and collusions and wrong values. Connivance, collusions, wrong value system. Now, let me give you an instance. I'm a certified anti-money laundering specialist, a US certification, a base certification. Now, we have what is called Financial Action Task Force, a global body that assesses money laundering, terrorism financing, and provision of weapons of mass destruction across the globe. And we also have several global bodies, United Nations Security Councils, or World Bank and IMF and so on, coming with several guidelines. We have International Association of Banking Supervisors, the Basel II organizations. We have that of SEC, we have that of insurance. There are several other organizations that come with various guidelines and rules and regulations. And then most of these laws are to be domesticated by, so most of these standards, recommendations, and pronouncement are to be domesticated by local legislation. Now in Nigeria, last year, 2020, not last 2 years, Nigeria came out with about 4 basic laws in that regard that has to strengthen our anti-financial crime regulations and guidelines that has to do with against money laundering, terrorism financing, proliferation financing of weapons of mass destruction, and the management and the guidelines of recovered assets. These were huge quantum leap to the regulatory or to legislative platform in Nigeria. But you know what? This law came into being in 2022 May. In February 2023, Nigeria was thrown to grey list. In Financial Action Task Force grey list, it is a list that shows a weak implementation of all those standard laws and so on. So they are saying that you have these laws, you have these guidelines, but you are not walking your talk. So I was not asking, so how come that we have all retinue of laws and yet we are still being sanctioned for going to, so if between now and 2025, we don't exit from that gray list, Nigeria will go to blacklist. That blacklist, Nigeria was on that list around 2003, 2004 to 2006. I think that's 2006 that Nigeria exited that list and started making some progress. Now 2023, we got back to that gray list on our way to the blacklist. What happens? Because the laws are there, but implementations, the observations are not being made. So we are saying, how come these laws are there? I've said that it is collusion and connivance, and then the value system. There's no part of the world that does not have crime. The only difference is that in most of those crime are punished with commensurate punishment. And so if you break traffic rule or traffic rule, you are sure that you get a ticket for it. They don't need to stop you on the road. If you breach any form of regulatory requirement, you are sanctioned for it. We all know about the case of Binance. Binance, the CEO or chief executive of the global giant crypto virtual assets transaction. A crime was committed. Nigeria discovered that his platform was used. He's been sanctioned in the US. He's been sanctioned in Canada. He was brought to Nigeria, but he was allowed to escape from Nigeria. Now, the question is that somebody was supposed to take charge of that process. What has happened to him? So we are saying that some of these crimes thrive because there's no commensurate sanction for breaching those regulations. The laws are there, the guidelines are there, the regulations are there. And you hear some organizations saying that we can do anything and nothing will happen because he knows who is in charge of a particular regulation or that particular regulator. He can always influence and pull his way through. And that is what keeps happening. Then you come down to the micro ecosystem, the micro environment. You discover that our value system have been eroded. So people now celebrate wealth more than integrity, more than good names. Last time I heard about the Association of Yahoo Mothers, Association of Mothers of Yahoo Men, or something like that. You should leave our children alone. They form association, so they are blunt and very proud to do that. What has happened to our value system? So you can realize that why crime continues to fester is because, one, our value system is eroded, regulatory environment is not as firm as it ought to be, and this collaboration, collaboration is positive. Collusion and connivance is what happens. There is no crime that takes place at some point to a reasonable degree that someone, especially in corporate environment or the public sector, that a professional was not involved. One way or the other, a professional was involved to advise, to direct, and to guide on how those things should happen. So if we can have a proper orientation and change our value system, because we realize that after all, some of those would have stolen billions and everything. What have they been able to achieve? What have they been able to do with it? You can't. In fact, the more you grow, the more they restrict what you eat. Sometimes you discover that most of the things that you used to think that you are enjoying is actually debt. So what are you doing with those billions? What are you doing with those millions you are stealing and depriving a lot of people from those things from being used to better the life of people? So those are the kind of things we talk about. So it's important we have. I don't know whether our whether we still have. Maybe I don't want to go into the political side, but we used to have national orientation agency in those days. When we were growing up, there will be constant jingle. Before you know it, subconsciously you begin to imbibe to some characters, to some attitudes, to some behaviors. You discover that these are things that are not done, but it appears, I don't know whether they're still existing or they are, but physically if they are existing, then they are not efficient, they are not effective. So things need to be done to start from that angle, and then the accountant, the professionals at all levels, not only accountant at every level, should begin to make the law to work. And those who are supposed to implement, sanction the offenders should be done.
Yeah.
Why it's been weak this way? Because some of the security agencies I'm very close to, they say that, well, they too are discouraged, because when you put in your life to do everything, at the end of it, carry out proper investigation, somebody tell you that there was another from above.
Yes.
You begin to realize that where do you now belong to? You have become the haunted, the criminal.
Yeah.
Become, and somebody recently was the man that was convicted for terrorism was just released, and he was given a rousing welcome with a chieftaincy and pop and this thing in his place. That is the value system that has been eroded. This was a man that was considered a criminal, destroyed lives and property, coming down to the village and was received with pomp and this. So those are the kind of issues we are talking about. That is why the law appears that is not being obeyed. But the law is far, far better. In fact, it's not weak. It's not weaker than what obtains in other environments. The only difference is that crime is being punished commensurately in other crime, but in Nigeria, to a large extent, it's being celebrated.
Yes. I guess it will get better, we hope, and we're very hopeful about our nation, Nigeria. So we have a question from Sheyi Adeniji here. He says, thank you, Mr. Obina Okafor. My question is, despite regulatory measures, policies, and controls put in place, why do we still have financial crimes everywhere in the government and blue chip entities? But he has a second question. He says, secondly, during your presentation, you did say that everybody is a victim in crime. Even the criminal is a victim of crime. Could you please shed light on this? I know we're running out of time, but we'll just take the questions as soon as possible. But I just want to acknowledge one of the ESCOs in Swan, Queen Agatha Osifo Whiskey. Thank you very much for joining the program also. Yes, you can answer the question, Mr. Okafor.
Yeah, everyone is a victim, because even the criminal himself doesn't have peace. If he hears a knock at his door, he thinks they have come after him. So that's how he's a victim. He may not be a victim in terms of the financial benefit, but psychologically he's a victim. He doesn't have peace. And most of them cannot sleep in a particular place because they are constantly being haunted. Now, okay, take for instance, even those who are involved in banditry, kidnapping, and so on, do they live in their houses? They live in the bush. So what is the benefit of going to gather hundreds and millions and you can't live in a particular place where you can be identified? So that's why they are victims, and their life also is not at peace. Then the other ones, every other person who resources was taken away from, you're a victim by that. So it is neither. Then for professionals, if you got involved in crime in one way or the other, you of course your reputation is at stake, and probably your operating your professionalism is also at stake. It can even lead to a point of withdrawing your certification that makes you a professional, and so you are a victim also in one way or the other. You don't have your voice can be shut down by being a party to the cookie jar.
Interesting. So everybody just noted I jotted something that you said about still on the aiding and abetting and also connivance, collusion and wrong values. So I hope that no one here is going to be a victim of such. I'm sure we will not. So my other question to you, sir, is the president's regime clocked 1 year yesterday. Assuming President Bola Ahmed Tinubu invite you to briefly speak to his Federal Executive Council members on the professional accountant, as catalyst or as regulatory, or that we must be regulatory compliance or we must imbibe that regulation and compliance. What would you tell? What are the points that you note, or what are the things that should be noted on your presentation slides?
Well, what I would say first of all is that the accountants, the auditors should be more empowered. The accountant general should be made to not to be report just like, okay, maybe the auditor general, more of it should not be an appendage of the executive. Just like in the private sector, the auditor reports to the board, and that will give him more of independence to be able to do his job without fear of favor. That can also happen to the accountant general. Then they should listen to those accountants, because by our training, we are trained to be managers of resources. We are trained to be proper allocators of resources. We know how to prioritize resources. We are trained to identify, to prepare a picture, to prepare an image of an organization and what should be prioritized and to do. So if they can listen to their accountants or professional accountant to empower them, and again, before somebody is said to that, probably there could be a further screening by the institute to look at a few things from an independent body from what the political system throws up. So that could be. But apart from that, the professional accountant should be listened to. His advices, he is to be empowered to have the authority to do certain things that he cannot do because of a bureaucratic system.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I have a question from Oshobukola Adewale. He says, how do you solve the problem if the management prefers to settle rather than comply with the relevant laws?
Well, provide your counsel, your advice. That's what you can do. You can't, to a large extent, you may not be able to prevent certain things or to stop something, but provide your professional advice and let them understand the implication of that settlement, because it will sometimes backfire. It will give you a reputational damage over time. An organization that exists by its reputation. People come to you because they believe you are doing something right. But over time, serious entities will not deal with you because they believe you cannot be trusted. Just like if you're in your organization and you are the one that provide always the crooked way of doing something, you always suggest the cutting of corners. When they want to look for something serious, they will not look for you. They will look for people who are always straightforward. So it might cost you something in the short run, but over time, when there are in fact, even when you have left the organization and there is a better opportunity somewhere, somebody will remember there's a particular person who was always straightforward. He maintained his motto as an accountant of accuracy and integrity. So that is it. It might cost you something in the short run, but in the long run, you'll be remembered.
Thank you. So I saw a message from Damilari Abdullah. He tried to clarify. He said the National Orientation Agency still exists, and he puts their website there. Thank you very much for listening. I mean, that shows you're paying attention. So we have a couple of questions, but of course we can't take every one of them. But I can see one from Ahmad Jaro. He says, secondly, sir, could you provide examples of successful collaborations between professional accountants and regulatory bodies in preventing and detecting financial crimes?
Okay, providing an example, I can't say precisely a particular example now, but what we can do, what can be done, we also have in various industries, we have technical committees, the accounting technical committees, auditors committees, and several other committees that are always going. Most times they work hand in hand with the regulators. Now, what most of the regulators have done is to provide some protection for the accountants and for the auditors. For instance, in the insurance industry, which I know, and also in the banks, and to a large extent in the capital market, you can't just sack the auditor anyhow without the approval of the regulator. So that is an empowerment, because from the regulatory point of view, from the various committees, in fact, they help to drive the developments, the various activities in the industry, because even most of the regulators are not as equipped, are not as resourced enough to be able to do so. Some of those things are generated. If you look at, I know so much about RAC, Research, Audit and Compliance Committee of Insurance. I also know about ACOBIN, Association of Compliance Officers of Banks, and so many other. So most of the things the government come up with copy and paste here. Sometimes they don't even know how to implement them. Sometimes it's those regulators. I mean, regulators are well versed, but they may not have enough resources to drive it. They drive it alongside with the collaboration of those self-regulating committees or industry self-regulating organizations, and that is the best way to do it. Most times they resolve some of these issues. One of the things we have tried to preach to the regulators is that the era of headmasters, pupils, or students should go. It should be a more of collaboration, great ideas, and what are the issues that can be done to be able to drive the development of the industries and sanction whoever now deviates from that collaborative effort. So that is what has happened over time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Obina Okafor. I guess we've been having a good time here, and time goes when things great is happening. So I know I have a lot of people still trying to check on one thing or the other, and the clarification that Larry made. Someone says it doesn't exist. I mean, it's just on paper, but they are not active anymore. But yeah, let's see if things pick up with the new national anthem, right, Mr. Obina? Mr. Obina, am I sure? Yes, something will start off well again in Nigeria. On this, at this juncture, I would like to say thank you so much, Mr. Obina, for yielding to our call to be here on ICAN on Air. We had a very great time with you, listening to you, and being the one. You're an expert in this field. I can tell you that with all the examples you put forward, we can coast home. I mean, we can do the right thing. We can be upright. We can act with integrity and accuracy. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, professional colleagues, for your time with us. Without you, there is no us here.
Yes. Have a good evening, sir. So, my professional colleagues, I hope you had a great time listening to the topic mitigating regulatory compliance risk and financial crimes. And Mr. Obina Okafor is the CEO of Vicos Bean Consult Limited. So I'd like to take a couple of announcements here before we close for the day. We have a couple of announcements. The first is notice of the 59th AGM. The date is 30th. It was today. So I hope, I want to wish everyone that attended, I hope you learned one thing or the other from the session. So investiture of the 60th president is Tuesday, June 4, 2024. The link to attend virtually is on the Institute's social media platform, but it's physically, when you want to attend physically, you need an invitation to do that. Public Finance Management Faculty certification training is in 5 days and is a hybrid training, July 22 to 26, and we hope that you'll be there. The cost is 75,000 naira, and the complete model is 220,000 naira. So we have other trainings that are coming up, including the International and Digital Economic Taxation Certification, which would happen at Ebute Meta. So please just reach out to the Institute, go to the website and pick all of these interesting topics that you want to participate in. At this junction, I'd like to say thank you everyone for joining the program. Remember that tomorrow is the end of the month and you need to make a while the sun shines. It's almost the mid-year already. I hope you've achieved something already for yourself. So from Fumi, Olani, and other members of the committees that sets up the ICAN on Air program, we want to say thank you very much everyone for joining and have yourself a lovely evening. Goodbye.